What's up, everyone? Tony from the Cold Case Project, back again. And today, what I want to run with you over is all content shared in these videos is readily available in any Google search. Now, with that said, I take this content, have it rewritten, and upon rewriting it, put it in these videos to spread the word on the thousands and thousands of cold cases of men and women throughout the United States that are just forgotten, and I give this platform to them so their cases and their stories can be told. Now, in addition to that, if you look down below in the description, you're going to see some brand new t-shirt and coffee cup designs I've actually gotten from couple of my subscribers who have over the years have been giving me some awesome fan art. So with that said, I'm offering a 20% discount code down below if you check that out, and splitting proceeds with them because they are awesome. Been watching me for quite some time, and I definitely think they deserve to be rewarded for some of the work they do on top of being full-time employees also. So, once again, if you have any recommendations or any suggestions, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the video. Like, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.
The year was 1980. A chill had already begun to settle over the plains and mountains of Wyoming as the summer bled into fall. In Riverton, a quiet town resting at the feet of the Wind River Range, 32-year-old Virginia Uden was packing her mother's station wagon with her son's belongings. .22 rifle, gear, snacks, coats. Her boys, 11-year-old Richard and 10-year-old Reagan, were excited for the bird hunting trip ahead with Gerald Uden, Virginia's ex-husband. They didn't know it would be the last time they'd ever see their mother. And the town, like so many others across America, would soon learn the story of a loving mother, 2 sons, and a cruel, calculated killer who nearly got away with it. Virginia Uden was a devoted mother of 2 boys and lived with her mother, Claire Easton, in Riverton. She had recently divorced Gerald Uden, a man known for his quiet demeanor, tight-lipped presence, and simmering resentment. Gerald was not the boys' biological father, but had legally adopted them during their marriage. After their split, Virginia retained primary custody. While their relationship was fractured, she attempted to maintain some form of civility for the sake of Reagan and Richard. She believed that her sons deserved a connection with a man who once filled a father figure role in their lives. Gerald Uden had remarried by 1980 to a woman named Alice Louise Uden, a former psychiatric nurse with a complicated past of her own. They had relocated together to a rural property and shared a mutual taste for control and secrecy. Gerald's relationship with Virginia had become increasingly strained, exacerbated by ongoing custody disputes, financial disagreements, and his growing disdain for the life he'd left behind. On September 12, 1980, Virginia and her boys visited Claire's home. The boys were dressed for the outdoors, eager to spend the day in the wild. They had brought a rifle with them, as Gerald had planned to take them bird hunting. At approximately 1:30 p.m., the family departed Claire's house in a borrowed 1973 Ford station wagon and vanished into thin air. They were never seen alive again. When Virginia and the boys failed to return later that day, panic set in quickly. Claire Easton reported them missing, and local law enforcement began their investigation. Initially, it was treated as a routine missing persons case. There were no signs of struggle, and with Gerald scheduled to meet them, there seemed to be a clear lead. But Gerald denied ever meeting them that day. He claimed Virginia never showed up. There were no witnesses, no sightings, and no calls. The car was gone. The rifle was missing. And 3 lives had vanished into the Wyoming landscape without a whisper. For weeks, there was nothing, no evidence, no bodies, no arrests. The case grew colder by the day. Then, nearly a month later on October 4th, 1980, a shocking discovery changed everything. Virginia's mother station wagon was found in the vicinity of North Federal Court in Riverton, about 40 miles from where Gerald and Alice lived. It had been driven to a remote canyon near Trout Creek, and seemingly shoved off the edge, only to be caught in a tangle of rocks and brush 75 feet down. Someone had attempted to hide the vehicle by covering it with pine branches. But it was what was inside that told the real story: blood. Large amounts of Virginia's blood were soaked into the interior, far too much for anyone to have survived. It was clear that violence had occurred, but the bodies were nowhere to be found. There were no fingerprints, no murder weapon, no footprints. The rifle was gone. The boys were gone. And Gerald Uden remained tight-lipped. Despite growing suspicions, investigators couldn't move forward. Gerald's denials held, and without bodies, they couldn't press charges. The forensic technology of the early 1980s was limited, and while Virginia's blood was present, there was no proof tying Gerald directly to the crime. Soon after the discovery of the vehicle, Gerald and Alice quietly packed up their lives and moved away, relocating to Missouri and distancing themselves from the case. The Uden case, like many others during that era, grew cold. Leads dried up. The community grieved. And for over 3 decades, justice for Virginia, Reagan, and Richard remained elusive. It wasn't until 2013, 33 years after the disappearance, that investigators finally caught a break. Gerald and Alice Uden, now living separate lives in Missouri and South Dakota, were both under quiet but intense scrutiny. Over the years, Alice had been suspected in the disappearance of her third husband, Ronald Holtz, in the mid-1970s. A new investigative push finally led to the discovery of Holtz's remains in an abandoned Wyoming mine shaft. With Alice's secrets unraveling, investigators returned to Gerald with renewed interest. Under pressure, and perhaps sensing the end was near, Gerald Uden finally confessed. In a detailed statement, he admitted what many had long suspected. He had murdered Virginia and the boys. On September 12, 1980, Gerald met Virginia and the children at a remote location near Pavilion, Wyoming. The rifle the boys had brought for bird hunting would not be used on birds. Gerald waited for them to get out of the car, and then, without warning, he opened fire. He shot Virginia first, then turned the rifle on Reagan and Richard. He placed their bodies in large metal drums and loaded them into his vehicle. From there, he drove to Fremont Lake, a deep glacial lake over 450 feet deep, and dumped the drums. No bodies have ever been recovered. In October 2013, Gerald Uden pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He showed no remorse and described Virginia as a predator who he claimed had made his life unbearable. His statement, devoid of any sense of sorrow or empathy, was chilling. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Around the same time, Alice Louise Uden was charged in the murder of her former husband, Ronald Holtz. She had reportedly shot him in the head and concealed his body in a mine shaft near the property she once shared with him. Her case went to trial in 2014, where she claimed the murder was an act of protection, an effort to shield her daughter from Ronald's alleged abuse. The jury didn't buy it. She was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. Between them, Gerald and Alice Uden accounted for 4 known murders, committed years apart but bound by secrecy, manipulation, and a chilling disregard for human life. Despite the confessions and convictions, the bodies of Virginia, Reagan, and Richard Uden have never been found. Fremont Lake, vast and deep, keeps its secrets well. Divers have attempted searches, but recovery at such depths is nearly impossible. To this day, their family still mourns without a gravesite. The grief has never faded, only changed shape over time. They cling to memories of Virginia's laughter, the boys' energy, the plans they never got to finish. For years, Gerald Uden walked free, a murderer masquerading as a man wronged. But the truth, like bones in a mine or blood in a car, eventually surfaced. If you have any information about the remaining details of this case or the potential recovery of the Uden family's remains, contact the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation at 777-7181. In the spring of 1974, 24-year-old Larry Marvin Morris was living in Riverton, Wyoming. Originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Morris was working in the rugged terrain of central Wyoming as a seismograph worker, a physically demanding job often requiring remote travel and long hours in the field. It was supposed to be a temporary gig. Once the job wrapped up, Morris planned a scenic detour through Yellowstone National Park before heading back home to Oklahoma. But Larry Morris never made it to Yellowstone, and he never returned home. Instead, his name would soon be linked to a trail of credit card receipts stretching across multiple states, a pickup truck abandoned in California, and a pair of ex-convicts with a disturbing connection to his final days. The young man with brown eyes, brown hair, and a quiet, hard-working demeanor disappeared into the vast American West, and despite decades of investigation, no trace of him has ever been recovered. April 26, 1974, marked the last confirmed sighting of Larry Morris in Riverton. By all accounts, there was nothing unusual about that day. He left no note, made no desperate phone call, and gave no indication that anything was wrong. His green 1966 Ford LTD pickup truck, bearing Oklahoma license plate RO 94, vanished along with him. There were no signs of foul play at his home in Riverton. The door was locked. His belongings, aside for what he'd presumably packed for the road, were undisturbed. It was as if Larry had simply driven off toward Yellowstone and disappeared into thin air. But by April 27th, Larry's name was being scrawled on gas station credit card receipts in towns he was never seen in, by people who clearly weren't him. Beginning just one day after Larry's disappearance, his credit card was used repeatedly in several states: Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, and California. 2 men were reported to have used the card, signing receipts with Morris's name. Witnesses described them casually making purchases as if nothing were amiss. On April 30th, 1974, the pair left Larry's green Ford pickup at a repair shop. They then rented another car, using Larry's name once again. The fraud came to an end on May 8th, when the men were arrested in Idaho. They were caught driving the rental car, still using Morris's credit cards. Their names were James Franklin Jagers and Jack Lincoln. Lincoln had just escaped from jail in Colorado in late April, just 2 days before Morris went missing. Jagers, his former cellmate, had been released from prison just a month earlier. Inside Morris's abandoned truck, police found fingerprints belonging to Lincoln. Morris's personal items and credit cards were on both men when they were arrested. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, neither man was charged with Larry Morris's disappearance. Nearly a decade later, in 1983, while incarcerated once again, Jack Lincoln approached authorities with a proposition. He would reveal the location of Larry Morris's body in exchange for a transfer to a different prison facility. Lincoln claimed that Morris was dead and that he knew exactly where the body was buried. But the deal never materialized, for reasons that remain unclear. Possibly due to legal limitations or doubts about Lincoln's credibility, investigators didn't act on the information. No recovery efforts were initiated, and Lincoln eventually recanted or remained silent. The opportunity vanished with him. It would be another 30 years before authorities revisited the case. In 2013, Wyoming officials brought new charges against Jagers, not for murder or kidnapping, but for auto theft and grand larceny related to the stolen pickup truck. That move gave renewed hope to Larry's loved ones that perhaps, finally, the case might lead to justice. But in August of that year, the charges were quietly reduced to petty larceny, and Jagers was released with credit for time served. The trail went cold again. Jagers died in 2014, never having been held accountable for anything more than credit card and vehicle theft. Lincoln's fate remains less publicly known, but no charges were ever filed against him related to Morris's disappearance. To this day, Larry Marvin Morris has never been found. No remains, no confirmed sightings, no firm answers. He was last seen on April 26, 1974. He stood between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet 0 inches tall, with brown hair and brown eyes. He was 24 years old at the time of his disappearance. His case is still treated as a homicide investigation, despite the absence of a body. Investigators and amateur sleuths alike have looked into unidentified remains across the western U.S., comparing the physical profile of Larry Morris with long unidentified John Does. While a few potential matches have emerged, none have been confirmed. Given the movement of Jaegers and Lincoln through multiple states, it's plausible Larry's remains were discarded far from where he was last seen. Here are a few John Doe cases that loosely match Morris's age, height, and timeline. 1. Clark County, Nevada, October 15, 1974. Skeletal remains found in a gypsum cave near Blue Diamond Road. Estimated age, 22, 28. Height, approximate 5 feet 11 inches. Clothing, light brown leather shirt, grayish pants, white socks, brown slip-on boots, silver Timex watch. Near complete skeleton, skull, and mandible intact. 2. San Bernardino County, California, December 29, 1974. John Doe recovered from a shallow grave. Estimated age, 25, 40. Height, 6 foot 0 inch. Weight, 205 pounds. Year off death estimated, 1973, 1974. Clothing, light-colored long-sleeve dress shirt with French-style cuffs. 3. Angeles National Forest, California, September 17, 1988. Estimated death, 1968, 1988. Age, 20, 60. Height, 5 feet 10 inches. Skeletal remains found in wooded terrain. Unidentified. Remains may have been buried long before discovery. 4. Sun Valley, California, November 5, 2017. Aberrel containing human bones discovered by a transient. Remains possibly burned. Fire engulfed the area in September. Estimated death, 1958, 2008. Wide age range. Robust male skeleton. These cases may be long shots, but they serve as reminders that unidentified remains are scattered across the American West, and that somewhere, maybe in a shallow grave or forgotten cave, Larry Morris may still be waiting to be found. We may never know exactly what occurred between April 26th and April 27th, 1974. But the facts suggest that Larry Morris encountered two desperate and dangerous men, both fresh out of the criminal system, who may have seen him as a means to an end. A way to get a vehicle, a way to get across state lines, a way to get away. Whether he was killed on the roadside, buried in a remote canyon, or discarded in an unmarked grave, the evidence points to murder. But until his remains are recovered, Larry Morris remains one of Wyoming's oldest and most haunting cold cases. Even decades later, cases like this can be solved with one tip. Maybe you were in jail with Jaegers or Lincoln. Maybe you overheard a story. Maybe someone in your family once mentioned a secret, a location, a regret. You don't need to be sure. You don't even have to give your name. If you have any information about the disappearance of Larry Marvin Morris, please contact the Fremont County Sheriff's Office or submit a tip to the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. The summer of 1985 was a season of transition for the Lovely family. After years of living in Southern California, 19-year-old David Vernon Lovely and his family, mother Ellen and younger sister Cynthia, known as Cindy, were preparing for a major move across the country. The destination, Massachusetts, where a new home and fresh start awaited. For the cross-country journey, the family took two vehicles. Ellen and Cindy drove a large yellow Ryder moving truck, stuffed with all their belongings. David, fiercely independent and a lover of motorcycles, insisted on riding his own vehicle, a 1978 Burgundy Yamaha 1100 outfitted with saddlebags and a luggage rack. The California license plate read 8N30E477. They made a pact. Ellen and Cindy would stop every 30 miles or so, allowing David to catch up or signal if anything went wrong. They were a tight-knit family, bonded not only by love, but by shared hardship. David had spent a large portion of his childhood in and out of hospitals due to congenital kidney issues. The condition had left him with a long, noticeable scar across his abdomen and a pale complexion. Due to the surgeries, Doctors warned him to avoid any contact sports or anything that might put pressure on his abdomen. A well-placed blow could be fatal. Despite this, David was described as gentle, intelligent, thoughtful, and slightly introverted. He had no history of running away or getting into trouble. He wasn't the type to ghost his family or vanish without a trace. As they rolled across the dusty roads of Wyoming in early August, the family neared the small town of Evanston. Ellen and Cindy suggested stopping for a rest. David declined. His motorcycle, he said, was acting up, mechanical issues, nothing serious, but he wanted to push on to the next truck stop in hopes of finding someone who could help. They made an agreement. David would go ahead and meet them at a rest area further east. Ellen and Cindy, exhausted from the long drive, stopped for the night and waited, then waited some more. He never showed. They continued calling out at rest stops, truck stops, diners. "Have you seen a tall kid on a burgundy Yamaha?" But no one had. Assuming David had simply continued east toward Massachusetts, they pressed on, expecting he'd eventually catch up or call. Days passed. No word, no sign, no David. It wasn't until they reached Massachusetts that Ellen called her sister, Barbara, hoping for news. That's when a critical piece of the puzzle dropped into place. Barbara told Ellen that David had called her on August 5th, the very day he separated from the family. He had used a payphone near Fort Bridger, Wyoming, and sounded unnerved. His motorcycle had broken down, he said, and he'd slept the previous night in a ditch beside the highway. Stranded and exhausted, David said he pushed the motorcycle for 3 miles until he reached a place called the Bingo Truck Stop. There, he was approached by a man described as rough-looking, riding a Harley-Davidson. The man offered to help David and ultimately repaired the bike, apparently free of charge. But David told his aunt something chilling. "The guy kind of scares me," he said. Barbara asked if he was okay. He said yes. He planned to continue riding to Rock Springs, where he'd meet back up with his family. He promised he'd call again once he arrived. That second call never came. By now, Ellen knew something was seriously wrong. She began calling police, both in Wyoming and in California. The response she got was disheartening. David, they said, was a legal adult. If he wanted to disappear, he had every right. They told her to wait, to be patient, to stop worrying. But David's family knew him. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't reckless. He was on his way to start a new life. Something had gone terribly wrong. 9 days after David's call, August 14th, 1985, 2 campers made a startling discovery while exploring a remote draw off South Baxter Road, near the Sweetwater County Airport, outside Rock Springs, Wyoming. There, sitting upright in an isolated area, was a 1978 Yamaha motorcycle. David's motorcycle. The keys were still in the ignition. The bike was in running condition and had half a tank of gas. Leaning against it were a couple of David's books. A blue knapsack lay nearby, though it was never definitively confirmed as his. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle, no David. Police were finally jolted into action, but by then, crucial time had already been lost. An extensive search was launched, scouring the surrounding brush and dirt roads. Helicopters scanning the open plains, dogs brought into track. Nothing turned up. The investigation soon hit a wall. One glaring oversight came to light. Law enforcement had never interviewed anyone at the Bingo Truck Stop. Not then, and as far as records show, not since. The man on the Harley who helped David remains unidentified to this day. With no body, no suspect, and no apparent crime scene, the case slid into the gray fog of cold cases. David's family, however, never stopped digging. Several prevailing theories began to circulate over the years. 1. Robbery gone wrong. David had $150 in cash on him when he disappeared. It wasn't a fortune, but enough to attract someone in a desperate situation. Perhaps someone targeted him, took him into the brush near Rock Springs, and something went wrong. 2. Biker encounter turns deadly. The Harley-Davidson rider David feared could have been more than a good Samaritan. Was David lured into a trap, killed in the vast Wyoming wilderness, and buried or left to vanish into the elements? 3. Accidental death. David had extensive abdominal scarring and a fragile internal system. Could a fight or simple altercation have led to a fatal internal injury? One blow could have killed him, and someone may have panicked and dumped the body in a remote area. 4. Police corruption or negligence in the mid-1980s. Some parts of Wyoming, including Rock Springs, had reputations for corruption, drug trafficking, and biker gang activity. Some believe David may have stumbled upon something or someone he shouldn't have, and local enforcement was either involved or indifferent. David's mother, Ellen Lovely, never gave up. She called police, media, private investigators, anyone who would listen. She distributed flyers, followed up on every tip, even cold ones from distant states. To this day, no trace of David has ever been recovered. At the time of his disappearance, David was wearing a white pullover or t-shirt, brown cotton pants, an army fatigue jacket, a red windbreaker, and sports shoes. He was not known to be carrying any weapons. He was 6 feet 4 inches with blondish brown hair and a striking abdominal scar, a permanent reminder of a childhood spent in recovery. He would be 57 years old today. For nearly 4 decades, David Lovely's disappearance has haunted his family. The Yamaha sat alone in the Wyoming dust, like a phantom of a journey left unfinished. Though time has marched forward, Ellen, Cynthia, and those who knew David remember him not for how he vanished, but for the quiet strength he showed through illness, his deep love for family, and the excitement he carried as he embarked on that last ride. He didn't run away. He didn't want to disappear. Someone or something took him away, and for now, at least, the highway keeps its secrets. The morning of July 24th, 1997, dawned bright and clear over the rugged peaks surrounding Lander, Wyoming, the kind of pristine summer day that called runners to the trails. 24-year-old Amy Wroe Bechtel, a dedicated marathoner and fitness instructor with a radiant smile, began her day like any other in the small mountain town she called home. She kissed her husband Steve goodbye as he departed for a rock climbing excursion in Du Bois, about 70 miles away. Neither could have imagined this ordinary farewell would be their last. Amy spent the morning attending to errands for the couple's newly purchased home. At the Wind River Fitness Center where she worked, she co-taught a children's weight training class with owner Dudley Irvine before leaving around noon. She returned briefly at 12:30 p.m. to collect a bag of bottles for recycling, the last time her co-workers would see her. Her final confirmed stop came at Camera Connection, a local photo shop, between 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Employees noted Amy seemed unusually hurried, frequently glancing at her watch as she discussed having a photo printed and framed for a contest. This mundane interaction would later become a critical timestamp in the investigation, the last independent verification of Amy's whereabouts before she vanished into the wilderness. What happened next has baffled investigators for nearly 3 decades. Amy drove her white 1991 Toyota Tercel station wagon into the Shoshone National Forest, parking along the remote loop road near Burnt Gulch, a steep, winding mountain route climbing over 2,000 feet in elevation. Within its first 6 miles, she left her keys tucked under papers on the passenger seat, her to-do list with notes about the 10K race route visible beside them. Dressed in her signature yellow tank top and black running shorts, the experienced trail runner set off into the rugged terrain she knew so well. As afternoon faded to evening, Steve Bechtel returned home around 4:30 p.m. to an empty house. Initially unconcerned, Amy often ran late into the evening. His worry grew as the hours passed with no sign of his wife. By 9 p.m., he began calling family members, learning no one had heard from Amy. At 10:30 p.m., Steve made the fateful 911 call that would launch one of Wyoming's most extensive search operations. His casual opening, "Hi, this is Steve Bechtel. I'm missing a person. Do you have an extra?" would later become a focal point for investigators scrutinizing his behavior. The discovery of Amy's abandoned car the next morning deepened the mystery. The unlocked vehicle sat undisturbed, her keys still hidden under papers, her $120 sunglasses resting where she left them. Notably missing was her green Eagle Creek wallet, though whether she took it with her or it was removed by someone else remains unknown. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no disturbed earth, no torn clothing, just an eerie void where a vibrant young woman should have been. What followed became one of Wyoming's largest and most intensive search operations. Fremont County Search and Rescue Leader Chip Williams coordinated hundreds of volunteers combing the rugged terrain in meticulously organized grid patterns. Helicopters equipped with infrared heat sensors crisscrossed the skies. Specially trained cadaver dogs sniffed through dense forest and along rocky outcroppings. Rock climbers scaled canyon walls while divers probed the depths of nearby Fry Lake. Yet after 5 grueling days covering more than 20 square miles of wilderness, searchers found nothing. Not a single footprint matching Amy's size 8, Adidas trail shoes, not a scrap of her distinctive yellow tank top, not even the slightest trace of the experienced runner who knew these trails intimately. The complete absence of evidence was, in itself, evidence that something was terribly wrong. As hope of finding Amy alive dimmed, suspicion naturally turned to those closest to her. Steve Bechtel's unusual behavior, from his oddly casual 911 call to his refusal to take a polygraph test on his attorney's advice, made him an early focus. Investigators obtained search warrants for the couple's home and Steve's blue pickup truck, uncovering journals containing disturbing passages about control and an undated poem some interpreted as describing hiding a body. A potential break came when a witness reported seeing a truck matching Steve's vehicle on Loop Road around the time of Amy's disappearance, with a blonde woman in the passenger seat. However, this lead evaporated when the witness couldn't positively identify either the truck or its driver. Without forensic evidence tying Steve to a crime, no blood, no signs of violence in their home, the case against him remains circumstantial at best. The investigation took a dramatic turn in 2003 when authorities arrested Dale Wayne Eaton for the 1988 abduction, rape, and murder of 18-year-old Lisa Marie Kimmel. Eaton, now Wyoming's only death row inmate, became a prime suspect in Amy's case when his brother revealed the violent offender had been camping less than a mile from where Amy's car was found. The timing was chilling. Just 2 months after Amy vanished, Eden abducted another couple at gunpoint along Interstate 80. FBI profilers believe Eaton may be the so-called Great Basin Killer, responsible for multiple unsolved murders across Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada between 1983 to 1997. The parallels between Amy's disappearance and Eaton's known crimes, remote locations, young female victims, brazen daytime abductions, are striking. Yet without Eaton's confession or physical evidence linking him to Amy's case, this theory remains frustratingly unproven. Other explanations have been proposed over the years. A hit-and-run accident covered up by locals, a tragic fall or animal attack in the wilderness, even the far-fetched theory that Amy staged her own disappearance. Each possibility collapses under scrutiny when confronted with the complete lack of physical evidence and the undisputed fact that Amy was a happy, stable young woman with everything to live for. Today, nearly 3 decades later, Amy's case remains as baffling as ever. Declared legally dead in 2004, her family has channeled their grief into establishing athletic scholarships in her name at the University of Wyoming and Northwest College. The rugged Shoshone National Forest that Amy loved so much guards its secrets fiercely, its vast wilderness offering endless hiding places but no answers. For those who knew and loved Amy Wroe Bechtel, the bright-eyed runner with Olympic dreams, the devoted wife, the beloved daughter and sister, the unanswered questions burn as fiercely today as they did on that July afternoon in 1997. Her disappearance stands as a haunting reminder of how easily someone can vanish without a trace, and how justice delayed may never come at all in the shadow of Wyoming's towering peaks. The mystery endures. Was Amy the victim of a chance encounter with a serial killer? Did she meet with an accident that remains hidden in the wilderness? Or does the truth lie in some as yet unconsidered scenario? Until new evidence emerges, if it ever does, Amy Wroe Bechtel's disappearance will remain one of the American West's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. Lynn Bush was reported missing by her husband, David Laban Bush, on December 9, 1990. He stated that the last time he saw her was the previous day when she went to the Buttrey's grocery store located on East 12th Street in Beverly and Casper, Wyoming. According to David, Lynn never returned home. The following day, David claimed to have found her pickup truck, a 1985 Ford F-150 with vanity license plates reading 1T Bush, abandoned in the store's parking lot. The truck's door was ajar, groceries were still in the back, and the keys were lying on the ground nearby. A receipt found inside the vehicle showed that Lynn had purchased the groceries at 5:30 p.m. on December 8th. Despite the unsettling scene, David did not report Lynn missing right away. He later explained to authorities that he assumed Lynn had left voluntarily to get back at him for his extramarital affairs. Only after a day had passed did he notify the police. Lynn's friends and family were immediately skeptical of David's story. They strongly doubted that she would abandon her 2-year-old daughter, Misty. Lynn was known as a devoted mother, and her sudden disappearance without any prior indication was deeply suspicious. Furthermore, David's behavior after her disappearance only heightened concerns. Just a short time after Lynn went missing, David invited his girlfriend to move into their home. Adding to the suspicion, David had a troubling criminal record. After Lynn's disappearance, he was charged with several crimes unrelated to her case, including burglary, voter fraud, and possession of false identification. Despite the doubts surrounding him, there was no concrete evidence tying him to Lynn's disappearance at the time. Lynn's parents, deeply concerned for their granddaughter's welfare, fought for custody of Misty. They were eventually granted custody, raising Misty in a safer and more stable environment. In 1999, nearly a decade after Lynn's disappearance, she was officially declared legally dead. During those years, no activity had been detected on her Social Security number, further supporting the belief that she had met with foul play. Years passed with no significant developments. Then in August 2006, authorities made a major breakthrough. David was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Lynn's disappearance. Investigators revealed they had uncovered new evidence that directly implicated him. Key among this evidence was the discovery of Lynn's blood inside the couple's pickup truck. DNA testing confirmed the bloodstains belonged to Lynn. Blood was also found on a vodka bottle inside David's house. The quantity and spread of the blood suggested a violent encounter, and authorities concluded that Lynn would have required medical attention to survive. Further damning evidence came from testimony and witness statements. David had allegedly made incriminating comments to others, claiming he had stored Lynn's body in a freezer. Additionally, while incarcerated for unrelated crimes, David confided in cellmates that he had beaten and shot his wife. Investigators also learned that David had stolen body bags from his National Guard unit around the time of Lynn's disappearance. The fact that he took not one, but 2 body bags added a chilling layer of suspicion. To complicate matters further, David's girlfriend at the time of Lynn's disappearance moved into the Bush home soon after and forged Lynn's signature on legal documents. While she was never officially charged with involvement in the crime, her actions drew additional scrutiny. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching evidence in the case came from Misty herself. After being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, Misty received counseling from a psychiatrist specializing in child trauma. Between the ages of 3 and 5, Misty made multiple statements indicating she may have witnessed her father murder her mother. She described in chilling detail scenes no young child should have knowledge of. Misty said, "Daddy cut Mommy, and Mommy got her head split open and she's dead." She also claimed her mother was in the mountain. The credibility of her statements was strengthened by her age-appropriate terminology and the emotional distress she displayed when recounting the events. At David's trial in March 2007, Misty, now older, testified against her father. However, she stated that she no longer remembered the traumatic events. Despite this, her earlier testimony and psychological evaluations weighed heavily in the case. After a 10-day trial, David Laban Bush was found guilty of Lynn's murder. He maintained his innocence throughout the proceedings, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. In 2010, he appealed his conviction, suggesting that his brother, who had a criminal history of his own, was responsible for Lynn's death. The court dismissed these claims, citing evidence that David's brother was not even in Wyoming at the time of Lynn's disappearance. David's conviction was upheld, and he remains incarcerated to this day. Despite the conviction, Lynn's remains have never been recovered. The lack of closure has continued to weigh heavily on her family. Misty, now an adult, has carried the pain of her mother's loss throughout her life. Lynn's parents, who fought so hard to protect their granddaughter, never saw justice in the form of a proper burial for their daughter. Authorities believe that David disposed of Lynn's body in a remote location, possibly in the nearby mountains. Efforts to locate her remains have been unsuccessful, but law enforcement continues to urge anyone with information to come forward. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Lynn Bush, please contact the Casper Police Department or the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. Even the smallest tip could bring long-awaited answers and closure to her loved ones. Lynn was 26 years old at the time of her disappearance. She stood between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 7 inches and weighed approximately 115 to 150 pounds. She had long brown hair and brown eyes. At the time she went missing, she may have been wearing pink tennis shoes, a wedding band, and a Black Hills gold engagement ring. While the legal case against David Laban Bush has concluded, the search for Lynn continues. Her family remains hopeful that one day they will be able to lay her to rest and find peace in knowing the full truth of what happened that fateful December evening. James Daniels Jr. was last seen in Yavapai County, Arizona, on the night of August 21st, 2021. At the time, the 42-year-old was helping a friend named Tony move from Nevada to Mississippi. The two were driving in separate vehicles, making their way along U.S. Highway 93. Unfortunately, during the trip, one of the vehicles experienced a flat tire between Kingman and Wickenburg, Arizona. The circumstances that followed have left James's family and friends searching for answers ever since. When the flat tire occurred, Tony left James with a box truck and a small trailer while he drove to Wickenburg to get the tire repaired. James also had his beloved brown and white spaniel named Penny with him. It was already late, and by the time Tony arrived in Wickenburg, businesses were closed, so he had to wait until morning to get the necessary repairs. In the meantime, James stayed behind with the truck, the trailer, and Penny. However, when Tony returned the next day, he found something that shocked him. James was nowhere to be seen. The truck remained on the side of the road, but James and Penny had vanished. For witnesses reported seeing James between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m. on August 22nd, 2021. He was described as being visibly disoriented and behaving erratically on the side of the highway. According to one of the callers, James appeared shaken and confused, clutching Penny tightly. His behavior concerned those who saw him, and the witnesses contacted the authorities. One witness reported that James repeatedly said, "I don't believe it." Another caller recalled James saying that someone had already promised to send help. He seemed distrustful and increasingly agitated. Despite the efforts of the Arizona State Troopers, who arrived at approximately 4:30 a.m., James had already disappeared by the time they reached the scene. While they didn't find James, they did see Penny. The frightened dog ran off into the desert when the officers tried to capture her. Despite efforts to locate the dog, Penny was not found at the time. Authorities searched the surrounding desert landscape, but there were no signs of James. His truck, a white International box truck with no license plates, remained parked on the side of the road. The truck had distinctive markings, including the words "Got Milk" on the back and "Liberty Distribution" on the sides. Since James's disappearance, his family has expressed growing concern. He was known as a caring and responsible individual, making his sudden disappearance all the more troubling. In the absence of definitive answers, they have held on to hope that he might still be found. While investigators have not determined the exact circumstances of what happened to James, they continue to follow any leads that arise. The Yavapai County Sheriff's Office and the Jackson, Wyoming Police Department, where James was originally from, have collaborated in the search. Several theories have emerged regarding James's disappearance. Some speculate that he may have suffered a medical emergency or a mental health episode, causing him to become disoriented and wander away from the vehicle. Others wonder whether he may have encountered foul play in the remote desert area. The extreme Arizona heat and rugged terrain also present concerns, as they can be dangerous for anyone stranded without adequate supplies. Investigators and search teams have scoured the area, but no significant evidence has been uncovered. Penny, the spaniel, has not been found, further deepening the mystery. Some believe that if Penny were located, it might provide additional clues as to what happened to James. James Daniels Jr. remains missing, and his family continues to search for any information that may lead to his whereabouts. His loved ones have pleaded with the public to come forward with any details, no matter how insignificant they may seem. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of James Daniels Jr., please contact the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office at 928-771-3260 or the Jackson, Wyoming Police Department. Even the smallest piece of information could provide the breakthrough needed to solve this case. On a frigid February evening in Gillette, Wyoming, Irene Gakwa ended a routine video call with her parents in Kenya, completely unaware this would be their final conversation. The 32-year-old nursing student's sudden disappearance days later would unravel a disturbing tale of financial exploitation, suspicious purchases, and a fiancé whose behavior raised more questions than answers. Irene's American dream began in 2019 when she left Nairobi to join her brothers in Idaho, pursuing her passion for healthcare. Described by family as shy but determined, the former Karoti Girls High School student quickly adapted to American life while maintaining her close-knit Kenyan roots through daily WhatsApp calls. Her relationship with Nathan Heitman, whom she met online in 2020, initially seemed like a cross-cultural love story. But cracks soon appeared. Court records reveal a turbulent pattern: multiple breakups, accusations of financial misconduct, and what family called controlling behavior. Despite this, the couple relocated to remote Gillette in 2021, where Irene enrolled at Gillette Community College while Heitman remained unemployed. Here is the disappearance timeline: February 24th, 2022. Irene's last confirmed contact, a video call where family noted she seemed tired but normal. February 25th. Neighbors report seeing Heitman burning materials in a newly purchased 55-gallon drum behind their home. Surveillance footage shows him buying work boots and a shovel at a local Walmart. March 3rd to 9th. Bizarre text messages in uncharacteristic English appear from Irene's accounts, claiming phone damage and an impending move to Texas. Digital forensics would later show these didn't originate from her device. March 10th. Irene's phone service is terminated. Her Gmail account is permanently deleted from Heitman's computer. March 20th. Family files missing persons report after discovering Heitman's story of Irene leaving with 2 trash bags doesn't match bank records showing he'd been systematically draining her accounts. Forensic accountants uncovered a damning pattern: $3,700 siphoned from Irene's savings via Zelle transfers, $3,230 in credit card charges including $287 at Walmart, $422 at Home Depot, multiple fuel purchases along remote highway routes, password changes locking Irene out of all financial accounts, a deleted Google search history on Heitman's devices from critical dates. Every lead takes us back to Nathan, admitted Gillette PD Detective Mark Andrews in a 2023 press briefing. The burn barrel, the financial activity, is refusal to cooperate. It's all textbook suspicious behavior. But without physical evidence, we're stuck. Local volunteers like Stacy Coaster have organized over 40 ground searches across Wyoming's harsh terrain. We've checked abandoned mines, oil fields, even dumpsters, Coaster shared. Someone in this town knows something. That drum didn't disappear into thin air. From Nairobi, Irene's father Francis struggles with the injustice. In Kenya, when someone vanishes, the whole village searches. Here, it's been years, and we still don't know if our daughter is alive in a basement or worse. Her brothers maintain a vigil outside Heitman's residence, where a Find Irene banner flaps ominously in the Wyoming wind. The critical unanswered questions are, why did Heitman purchase a shovel and industrial cleaning supplies the day after Irene vanished? What was burned in the 55-gallon drum neighbors witnessed? Where eyes the silver Subaru Crosstrek scene leaving their property that night? Why did Heitman wait 24 days to report Irene missing while emptying her accounts? Irene's case remains active. If you have information about sightings off a 55-gallon drum in late February 2022, suspicious activity around abandoned mines oil sites, the whereabouts of a silver 2018 Subaru Crosstrek, contact Gillette PD at 682-5155 or Campbell County Crime Stoppers. A $25,000 reward remains for information leading to resolution. Carleen Brown was last seen in Rawlins, Wyoming on July 4, 1974. 19 years old at the time, Carleen stood between 5'2" and 5'3" tall and weighed approximately 100 to 120 pounds. She had distinctive red or auburn hair, freckles, and had developed corns on her big toes. On that Independence Day, she attended the Little Britches Rodeo at the local fairgrounds alongside her friend, Christine and Christy Gross, also 19 years old. Both young women vanished without a trace, leaving their families and community in turmoil. The circumstances surrounding Carleen and Christy's disappearance were initially unclear. Some reports suggest their vehicle was abandoned at the fairgrounds, while others state it was located in the town of Worland, Wyoming, over 200 miles to the north. This conflicting information only added to the confusion of the investigation. Authorities first considered the possibility that Carleen and Christy left willingly. However, as days turned into weeks with no contact from the young women, investigators became increasingly convinced that foul play was involved. Christine Gross's skeletal remains were discovered 9 years later, on October 27, 1983, just 3 miles south of Sinclair, Wyoming. She had been killed by 2 heavy blows to the skull. Despite the tragic discovery of Christy's body, there was no sign of Carleen. To this day, her fate remains unknown. The unsettling disappearances of Carleen and Christy were not the only ones to plague Rawlins in the summer of 1974. 2 other females vanished within a matter of weeks. On August 4, 1974, 14-year-old Deborah Meyer disappeared while walking to a movie theater in Rawlins. Then, on August 23rd, 10-year-old Jaylene Dawn Banker vanished from the Rawlins Fairgrounds. Jaylene's partially clothed body was discovered in a field on April 24, 1975, 8 months after her disappearance. Like Christy, she had been killed by a blow to the head. Deborah, however, has never been found. Authorities have long suspected that these cases may be connected. One man, Royal Russell Long, has emerged as a possible suspect in Carleen and Deborah's disappearances, as well as the murders of Christy and Jaylene. Long had a long and disturbing criminal record. In 1985, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping of Sharon Bald Eagle, a South Dakota teenager, and was also charged with the murders of Cinda Pallett and Charlotte Kinsey, though those charges were ultimately dismissed due to lack of evidence. Long was known to frequent local fairs and carnivals, working various odd jobs. His presence in Rawlins during the summer of 1974 made him a key figure of interest. However, he was never convicted in connection to the disappearances or murders of Carleen, Deborah, Christy, or Jaylene. He died in prison in 1993, taking any possible secrets he held with him. Carleen's family endured unimaginable pain in the years following her disappearance. Her adoptive parents divorced before 1974, and Carlene lived with her father and brother in Rawlins while her mother resided in Colorado. Despite their fractured family dynamic, they remained committed to finding answers. Sadly, all of Carlene's adoptive family members have since passed away without ever knowing what happened to her. Investigators continue to suspect foul play in Carlene's case. Given the brutal nature of Christy and Jaylene's murders, it is feared that Carlene met a similar fate. However, without her remains, her case remains open, and the search for answers continues. In the absence of closure, Carlene's memory lives on. If you have any information regarding Carlene Brown's case, please contact the appropriate authorities. Carlene Brown was last seen in Rawlins, Wyoming on July 4, 1974. 19 years old at the time, Carlene stood between 5'2" and 5'3" tall and weighed approximately 100 to 120 pounds. She had distinctive red or auburn hair, freckles, and had developed corns on her big toes. On that Independence Day, she attended the Little Britches Rodeo at the local fairgrounds alongside her friend, Christine and Christy Gross, also 19 years old. Both young women vanished without a trace, leaving their families and community in turmoil. The circumstances surrounding Carlene and Christy's disappearance were initially unclear. Some reports suggest their vehicle was abandoned at the fairgrounds, while others state it was located in the town of Worland, Wyoming, over 200 miles to the north. This conflicting information only added to the confusion of the investigation. Authorities first considered the possibility that Carlene and Christy left willingly. However, as days turned into weeks with no contact from the young women, investigators became increasingly convinced that foul play was involved. Christine Gross's skeletal remains were discovered 9 years later, on October 27, 1983, just 3 miles south of Sinclair, Wyoming. She had been killed by 2 heavy blows to the skull. Despite the tragic discovery of Christy's body, there was no sign of Carlene. To this day, her fate remains unknown. The unsettling disappearances of Carlene and Christy were not the only ones to plague Rawlins in the summer of 1974. 2 other females vanished within a matter of weeks. On August 4, 1974, 14-year-old Deborah Meyer disappeared while walking to a movie theater in Rawlins. Then, on August 23rd, 10-year-old Jaylene Dawn Banker vanished from the Rawlins Fairgrounds. Jaylene's partially clothed body was discovered in a field on April 24, 1975, 8 months after her disappearance. Like Christy, she had been killed by a blow to the head. Deborah, however, has never been found. Authorities have long suspected that these cases may be connected. One man, Royal Russell Long, has emerged as a possible suspect in Carlene and Deborah's disappearances, as well as the murders of Christy and Jaylene. Long had a long and disturbing criminal record. In 1985, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping of Sharon Baldeagle, a South Dakota teenager, and was also charged with the murders of Cinda Pallett and Charlotte Kinsey, though those charges were ultimately dismissed due to lack of evidence. Long was known to frequent local fairs and carnivals, working various odd jobs. His presence in Rawlins during the summer of 1974 made him a key figure of interest. However, he was never convicted in connection to the disappearances or murders of Carlene, Deborah, Christy, or Jaylene. He died in prison in 1993, taking any possible secrets he held with him. Carlene's family endured unimaginable pain in the years following her disappearance. Her adoptive parents divorced before 1974, and Carlene lived with her father and brother in Rawlins while her mother resided in Colorado. Despite their fractured family dynamic, they remained committed to finding answers. Sadly, all of Carlene's adoptive family members have since passed away without ever knowing what happened to her. Investigators continue to suspect foul play in Carlene's case. Given the brutal nature of Christy and Jaylene's murders, it is feared that Carlene met a similar fate. However, without her remains, her case remains open, and the search for answers continues. In the absence of closure, Carlene's memory lives on. If you have any information regarding Carlene Brown's case, please contact the appropriate authorities. Paul Hibbert was last seen on May 28, 1976. He was a geologist from Meade, Colorado, working for Berga Exploration in Adams County, Colorado. Hibbert had been employed with the company for 2 years and was considered a reliable and responsible employee. His disappearance remains a mystery, entangled with strange circumstances and criminal activity. A week before Hibbert vanished, he received a suspicious phone call from someone claiming to work for Berga Exploration. The caller instructed him to bring his specialized geological van to a location near Gillette, Wyoming, suggesting the equipment was needed for a project. However, when Hibbert inquired with his supervisor, the company confirmed no such request had been made. Believing it to be a hoax, Hibbert dismissed the call. On May 28th, Hibbert was believed to have been on a routine geological exploration trip in Gillette. His specialized truck, used for detecting uranium, coal, oil shale, and other minerals, disappeared along with him. The van was equipped with $30,000 worth of radioactive material, safely stored in a lead shield to prevent exposure. Hibbert's boss suspected that he may have been kidnapped and forced to work as a logging operative for an illegal geological exploration group. His advanced knowledge and the valuable equipment he managed would have been highly desirable for such operations. 2 months after his disappearance, a breakthrough occurred. Authorities discovered nearly $10,000 worth of Hibbert's geological equipment in the possession of Joseph O. Dowdy, a resident of Upton, Wyoming. Dowdy, who worked for an oil and gas drilling company, attempted to sell the equipment to his employer. Recognizing the items as stolen, the employer contacted law enforcement. Dowdy was arrested and charged with grand larceny. Investigators questioned him about Hibbert's whereabouts, but Dowdy did not provide any substantial information. Despite the pressure from authorities, no leads emerged. In January 1977, Dowdy pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 1 to 3 years in prison. The investigation took another turn in August 1976, when an anonymous caller tipped off police to the location of Hibbert's truck. The vehicle was found abandoned 3 miles northwest of Upton in a heavily wooded area near a series of water pits. Inside the cab of the truck, officers discovered a disturbing amount of human blood. It stained the floor mats, soaked into the seat, and splattered across the door. The presence of so much blood suggested foul play. While DNA testing was unavailable at the time, the FBI performed blood typing. Unfortunately, Hibbert's blood type was never confirmed, making identification impossible. The motive behind Hibbert's disappearance remains unknown. Some speculate that he was the victim of a violent robbery or possibly murdered to cover up illicit activities. Others believe he was abducted for his geological expertise, forced to assist in illegal resource extraction. The lack of remains and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the case have only deepened the uncertainty. Adding to the enigma, there have been speculative connections to unidentified bodies. In February 1976, before Hibbert's disappearance, a John Doe was found in rural Utah. Estimated to be between 30 and 35 years old, the body had distinctive features that bore some resemblance to Hibbert. However, the timeline did not align, and the possibility of it being Hibbert was ruled out. Another John Doe, discovered in Washington state in 1978, was also considered. Despite some similarities, no definitive match was ever established. Hibbert was engaged to be married at the time of his disappearance. His loved ones were devastated by the sudden loss and the unanswered questions surrounding his fate. Over the years, they have continued to hope for closure. Law enforcement still classifies his case as a suspected homicide. Today, Paul Hibbert's case remains unsolved. Carl Schaw was last seen on November 28, 2013, in Aurora, Colorado. Originally from Wyoming, Carl had moved to Colorado in January 2012 with hopes of establishing a foothold in the state's emerging marijuana industry. He had been living with his business partner in Aurora But what was meant to be a fresh start in a booming market soon turned into a concerning mystery. According to his business partner, Carl left their shared home following a heated argument. He reportedly departed with no clear destination, and from that moment on, he vanished without a trace. His loved ones grew increasingly worried when Carl failed to make contact. Despite the partner's claims, suspicions soon mounted as evidence suggested a more sinister explanation for Carl's disappearance. One of the most puzzling aspects of Carl's case was the activity on his debit card in the days following his disappearance. On the day he went missing, the card was used at a gas station in Aurora. However, Carl's sister, who monitored the transactions, was certain that it wasn't him using the card. The next day, additional charges appeared, including purchases at a gas station in Elise, Nebraska, and another in Fort Morgan, Colorado. The irregularities didn't end there. The card was also used to pay for a $70 dinner at a steakhouse in Aurora. On December 3rd, a man used Carl's card to buy cigarettes at a Murphy's Express gas station, even signing Carl's name. Surveillance footage confirmed that the individual making these transactions was not Carl. Despite this damning evidence, the man's identity and connection to Carl's disappearance remain unclear. The card continued to be used until December 8th, when the funds in Carl's account were depleted. After that, there was no further financial activity. These details led authorities to suspect foul play. Carl may have been driving a Chevrolet S10 pickup truck with Wyoming license plates at the time he disappeared. Adding another layer to the mystery, he was possibly accompanied by his dog, a blue heeler named Bez. Despite extensive searches in Colorado and Wyoming, neither Carl nor Bez have been found. Authorities in both states have remained active in their investigations, treating the case as a suspected homicide. Carl's family continues to push for answers, believing that someone knows what happened to him. Unanswered questions include who was using Carl Scholes' debit card and why. What happened in the days immediately following his disappearance? Did Carl's business dealings in the marijuana industry play a role in his vanishing? Where's Carl Scholl now? The case remains open, and both the Aurora Police Department and the Natrona County Sheriff's Office are seeking any information that may help resolve Carl Scholl's disappearance. Amber Elizabeth Scholes was last seen in the early morning hours of November 8, 1981, in Rock Springs, Wyoming. She had attended a party the previous evening with her boyfriend and another friend. According to reports, Scholes left the party at approximately 3 a.m., accompanied by her friend. By 3:30 a.m., she was last seen standing at the door to her residence at the Plaza Court Apartments on Dewar Drive. Her friend saw her safely to the entrance before departing. From that moment on, Amber Scholes vanished without a trace. Later that morning, when attempts to contact Scholes failed, concerned friends and family checked her apartment. The scene they encountered was unsettling. While there was no visible sign of a struggle or forced entry, something about the circumstances suggested that Scholes had left in a hurry. Her personal belongings were still inside her residence. Her wallet, containing an uncashed payroll check, and her purse were located in the kitchen. Her watch was found in the bathroom, leading investigators to speculate she may have removed it to wash up before bed. On the kitchen table, Scholes's monthly budget appeared to be in progress, further suggesting that she had no intention of leaving for an extended period. Her apartment was neat and undisturbed, with nothing overtly amiss except for her unexplained absence. The only major item missing was her vehicle, a 1971 Oldsmobile two-door with Wyoming plates. At the time of her disappearance, Amber Scholes was navigating a challenging period in her life. She was embroiled in a custody battle over her young son with her former boyfriend. While it is unknown if her legal struggles played a role in her disappearance, authorities did not dismiss the possibility of a connection. Custody disputes can often escalate, and in many cases, the tension between involved parties may lead to violent outcomes. Originally from Fort Benning, Georgia, Scholes had spent much of her life in Ohio before relocating to Wyoming. She was only 21 years old when she disappeared, standing between 5 feet 4 inches and 5 feet 6 inches, and weighing around 115 pounds. Her physical description included medium-length straight brown hair, freckles across her nose and cheeks, and a notable cesarean scar on her abdomen. She had also previously had her tonsils removed. The last known outfit she was wearing consisted of a navy blue hooded sweatshirt, a white blouse, Levi jeans, and white Nike tennis shoes. Scholes wore 2 distinct rings, a gold band with a pearl and a gold band with a sapphire, surrounded by 16 diamond chips. Despite the concerning nature of Scholes's sudden disappearance, the investigation faced several challenges from start. It wasn't until November 20th, 1981, 12 days after Scholes was last seen, that her father officially reported her missing to the authorities. This delay may have hindered the collection of crucial evidence during the early hours and days of her disappearance. With no clear signs of a break-in and no reports of a disturbance, investigators speculated that Scholes may have left her apartment voluntarily. However, the presence of her personal items and the lack of communication in the days following her disappearance cast doubt on that theory. As investigators worked to piece together Scholes's last known movements, they explored several possible leads. They interviewed friends, acquaintances, and her ex-boyfriend, but no substantial evidence emerged to point to her whereabouts. The fact that her car was also missing expanded the search area significantly, though the vehicle itself was never found. Some believe that Scholes may have become the victim of foul play. The custody battle could have created emotional tension, and while no direct evidence implicated her ex-boyfriend, investigators could not ignore the potential for conflict. Others wondered if Scholes had encountered a stranger after arriving home that night, leading to an abduction. Decades later, Amber Scholes's disappearance remains unsolved. The case remains open, with authorities periodically reviewing leads and encouraging the public to come forward with any information. If you have any knowledge of Amber Scholes's whereabouts or circumstances surrounding her disappearance, please contact the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation at 777-7181. Stuart Isaac, a 48-year-old man from Buttonsville, Maryland, disappeared without a trace in the vast wilderness of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming on September 24, 2010. His case remains one of the most perplexing missing person mysteries in recent history, leaving behind unanswered questions and a grieving family desperate for closure. On September 6, 2010, Stuart left his home, leaving only a brief note for his family that stated he was going on a cross-country trip. There was no further explanation, no mention of his destination, and no apparent reason for the sudden departure. This note was the first clue in a series of puzzling events that would follow. Over the next few weeks, Stuart's family and friends had no direct contact with him. It wasn't until September 24, 2010, that Stuart made a final phone call to a longtime friend from high school who lived in Guam. During this 2-hour conversation, Stuart mentioned his plans to visit Yellowstone National Park. This call, unusually lengthy given Stuart's typical preference for text messages and emails, left his friend uneasy. Why would Stuart, someone with no experience in hiking or outdoor survival, choose to venture into one of the most rugged and unpredictable landscapes in the country? On September 26th, park rangers discovered Stuart's black 2009 Lexus IS 250 abandoned at Craig Pass, a remote and desolate area along the Grand Loop Road that connects Old Faithful and West Thumb. The car's doors were unlocked, the keys were still inside, and there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Despite the initial belief that Stuart may have wandered into the park, there were no indications he had prepared for a hiking or camping trip. The location of the vehicle was particularly troubling. Craig Pass is not a common stop for tourists, and it has no designated hiking trails. Without the proper gear or experience, venturing into the wilderness there could be dangerous, even deadly. Search and rescue teams launched extensive efforts by air and on foot, scouring the rugged terrain for any sign of Stuart. Despite their best efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Friends and family described Stuart as a reserved and responsible man with a stable life. He had no history of mental illness or erratic behavior. He worked as an IT professional, and although he lived a relatively quiet life, he maintained strong ties with his family. His decision to abruptly leave without informing anyone seemed out of character. Adding another layer to the mystery, there were no suspicious financial transactions on Stuart's accounts, and his phone was never located. Law enforcement officials investigated the possibility of foul play, but no concrete evidence emerged to support this theory. Equally, there was no indication that Stuart had staged his own disappearance. To this day, Stuart's disappearance remains an enigma. Investigators continue to speculate about what may have happened. Did Stuart encounter someone in the park who posed a threat to him? Could he have suffered a medical emergency or an accident that prevented him from returning to his car? Was his final call to his friend in Guam a farewell or a subtle cry for help? Did he intend to disappear, leaving behind the life he once knew? Despite years of searching, no definitive answers have surfaced. Yellowstone National Park, with its sprawling wilderness, unpredictable weather, and unforgiving terrain, has claimed the lives of numerous visitors over the years. The park's vast landscape can easily conceal evidence, making it challenging for search efforts to succeed. Stuart's family continues to seek answers, holding on to the hope that new information will emerge. They urge anyone who may have seen or heard from Stuart around the time of his disappearance to come forward. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Stuart Isaac, please contact the National Park Service Investigative Services branch at 1-888-653-0009. Christy Richardson was last seen at her home on East 24th Street in Casper, Wyoming, at 7:45 p.m. on October 6, 2014. She was supposed to arrive at work at 7:15 a.m. the following day, but she never did and has not been heard from since. When police arrived at Christy's home on October 7th, they found it locked. Her identification was left on the kitchen counter, her cell phone was on her bed, and her purse, containing a large amount of cash, was still inside the house. However, the garage door opener that Christy normally kept in her purse was missing. Police also discovered that her bed sheets had stains resembling blood or urine. Despite the unsettling scene, none of Christy's vehicles had been taken. Christy Richardson was the owner of Richardson Trucking, a successful business she and her late husband established in 1979. After her husband passed away in 2013, she continued to manage the company's day-to-day operations. Her dedication to the business made her absence on October 7th all the more alarming. The last known person to see Christy was one of her employees. Authorities identified a person of interest in Christy's disappearance, a former employee of Richardson Trucking. The man, whose name has not been publicly released, was married but had reportedly pursued a romantic relationship with Christy. He had attempted to rekindle their relationship after her husband's death and again shortly before she vanished. However, Christy rejected his advances. Despite this information, there has been no solid evidence linking him to her disappearance. Law enforcement officials have classified Christy's disappearance as suspicious, yet they continue to investigate it as a missing persons case rather than a criminal act. Christy's 2 children have since taken over the management of Richardson Trucking and have sold her home. In the aftermath of Christy's disappearance, her family offered a $250,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible. Despite the reward and ongoing efforts, the case remains unsolved. Various theories have emerged regarding Christy's fate. Some speculate she may have been abducted, particularly given the strange circumstances surrounding her home and the absence of the garage door opener. Others believe her rejection of the romantic advances from the former employee may have played a role in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence has confirmed any of these theories. For years, Christy's family has struggled with the uncertainty of her whereabouts. They have continued to advocate for her case, urging anyone with information to come forward. Law enforcement has encouraged the public to report any details that may be relevant, no matter how insignificant they may seem. Anyone with information regarding Christy Richardson's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation at 777-7181. Even if the information seems minor or speculative, authorities emphasize that every lead can be valuable in solving the case. Kathleen Paringer was last seen at her Riverton, Wyoming home on April 17, 1989. She disappeared while her 14-year-old daughter, Kelly Paringer, was at school. Kathleen took her purse and glasses with her, but her vehicle was left behind, parked in front of the house. When Kelly returned from school, her mother was gone. There was no note explaining her absence, which was highly uncharacteristic. Kathleen, described by her loved ones as responsible and punctual, was attending classes at Central Wyoming College and working part-time at the Hilltop Bar. Despite an immediate search, she has never been heard from again. Authorities believe Kathleen may have left her residence willingly, possibly with someone she knew, expecting to return shortly. The house showed no signs of struggle, but one small detail stood out. The ashtray had been recently cleaned, containing only 2 cigarette butts. One was from Kathleen's preferred brand, while the other bore a distinctive mark. It had been crushed down to a nub. Kelly recognized this as a signature habit of Donald Kenneth Pack Jr., a man her mother knew. Pack, a paroled criminal with a violent past, had been convicted of aggravated rape and kidnapping. During the mid-1970s, he was a suspect in more than 30 rapes in the Jackson, Wyoming area. Pack's preferred victims were single or divorced women in their mid-30s, slightly overweight, and a below-average to average height, a profile that fit Kathleen. The afternoon Kathleen disappeared, Pack stopped by the house. He asked Kelly where her mother was and then requested to use the phone. After dialing a number, he quickly hung up without leaving a message. Kelly later found her mother's diary, revealing Kathleen had been dating Pack. The relationship was troubling to Kelly, who was uneasy around him. Pack had met Kathleen through her ex-boyfriend under the pretense of purchasing her computer. A year after Kathleen's disappearance, Pack's parole was revoked due to weapons charges. He served another year in prison before being released. In 2018, he faced new charges after DNA evidence connected him to 2 unsolved rapes from the 1970s. Pack ultimately served 55 months for these crimes before being released on parole again. Although he admitted to those rapes and apologized to his victims, Pack consistently denied any involvement in Kathleen's disappearance. Investigators suspect foul play, and Kathleen is believed to have been murdered, despite efforts to gather evidence, including searches involving cadaver dogs at a property linked to Pack. No physical remains or definitive evidence of Kathleen's fate were found. Kelly Paringer's life changed drastically after her mother vanished. With no immediate family willing to take her in, she entered the foster care system. She cycled through various placements, enduring traumatic experiences before ultimately finding stability in a group home during her senior year of high school. Though she graduated and moved forward in life, Kelly battled substance abuse and mental health struggles, enduring the emotional toll of her unresolved loss. Over the years, Kelly has sought answers through both law enforcement and unconventional means, including psychics and mediums. One medium told her that Kathleen was smiling from the other side, encouraging her to stop searching. However, Kelly remains determined to find out what happened to her mother. The Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation continues to investigate Kathleen's case. The lack of definitive evidence has hindered progress, and key details remain elusive. As of today, Kathleen Paringer's case remains unsolved. Anyone with information is urged to contact authorities. Kathleen was 41 years old at the time of her disappearance, standing between 5 feet 0 inches and 5 feet 2 inches, and weighing 110 to 130 pounds. She had short, curly brown hair, brown eyes, and wore glasses. Despite decades passing, her family and loved ones continue to seek closure and justice. If you have any information about Kathleen Paringer's disappearance, please contact the Riverton Police Department or the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation. Grand Teton National Park is a sprawling expanse of jagged peaks, pristine alpine lakes, and quiet wilderness that draws thousands of visitors each year. It's a place of beauty and serenity, but it's also remote, unforgiving, and at times perilous. On June 8, 2021, 27-year-old Kian McLaughlin, an avid outdoorsman and Irish native living in Jackson, Wyoming, walked into this wilderness and never came back. Kian was well-liked, friendly, and known for his love of the outdoors. Born and raised in Ireland, he made the bold decision to relocate to the American West, seeking a life where he could be immersed in nature. During the winter months, he worked as a snowboard instructor at Jackson Hole Mountain Resort. In the summer, he picked up shifts at a local bar. By all accounts, Kian was not only physically fit, but also very familiar with the trails and terrain surrounding Jackson and the national park. He had a particular love for Grand Teton National Park, located just north of Jackson. On June 8, 2021, the weather was fair, sunny with afternoon clouds. At 2:15 p.m., Kian was seen entering the park through the Moose entrance station, alone. It was a weekday, and there was nothing particularly notable about his entrance, except for the fact that it would be the last confirmed sighting of him. His cell phone last pinged near Cottonwood Creek along Teton Park Road shortly after he entered the park. That data point provided authorities with their first clue in what would quickly become a massive and confounding search. When Kian failed to show up for his bar shift 2 days later on June 10th, friends and coworkers began to worry. He hadn't told anyone he was going hiking, but that wasn't unusual. Still, he was responsible and known to be communicative. By June 12th, he was officially reported missing, and the National Park Service launched an extensive search effort. Initial search efforts focused on a broad area. Rangers knew he had entered through the Moose Station, but from there he could have headed in multiple directions, toward Taggart Lake, Bradley Lake, the Garnet Canyon Trail System, Delta Lake, or even Surprise and Amphitheater Lakes. He had not left an itinerary, making the search more difficult. Adding to the confusion was a witness statement from a woman named Heather Mykoski, who claimed to have seen Kian in the late afternoon or early evening of June 8th. Mykoski told rangers that she saw him hiking on the south side of the Bradley-Taggart Moraine. According to her statement, the two had even struck up a short conversation. She claimed Kian told her he was from Ireland, currently living in Jackson, and that he was planning to jump into Taggart Lake from his favorite rock. This tip redirected the search to the Taggart Lake area, where rangers spent precious time and resources looking for any sign of McLaughlin. But something about the sighting didn't sit right. As investigators worked to piece together Kian's last known movements, other leads painted a different picture. Multiple unconfirmed sightings placed him on the trail system heading toward Garnet Canyon, Delta Lake, and Surprise Lake, not the Taggart Lake area described by Mykoski. Adding weight to those suspicions was the fact that McLaughlin had recently searched online for directions to Delta Lake, a remote, unofficial trail known for its striking blue waters and panoramic views. It was a local favorite, but not an easy hike, especially the last leg, which required traversing steep and rugged terrain. Eventually, authorities determined that Heather Mykoski's entire statement had been fabricated. There had been no conversation, no sighting, and likely no encounter at all. The reason she gave for lying remains unclear, but the consequences were serious. For 9 days, search crews had deployed helicopters, drones, search and rescue teams, canine units, and volunteer hikers in the wrong area. In May 2022, Mykoski was charged with filing a false report. She later entered into a deferred prosecution agreement, in which she admitted to the false statement, agreed to pay $17,600 in restitution, and was banned from Grand Teton National Park for 5 years. Meanwhile, the search for Grand Teton National Park is not just a scenic backdrop. It's a wild and often treacherous place. In early June, snowmelt can make trails slippery and fast-moving creeks difficult to cross. Loose rock, steep cliffs, and sudden changes in weather can turn a routine day hike into a life-threatening situation. The trail to Delta Lake, in particular, is unmaintained and strenuous, requiring navigation over boulder fields and snow fields in early summer. It's not an official trail, which means it lacks signage and consistent maintenance. Still, McLaughlin was reportedly familiar with the area. He had the experience and skill for such a hike. But experience doesn't always guarantee safety. Despite extensive air and ground searches, no trace of to understand the impact of his disappearance. One must understand who Kian was. Friends and family described him as warm, kind, and full of life. His decision to live in Jackson was inspired by his love for the outdoors. He wasn't just an occasional hiker. He built his life around the mountains, the seasons, the snow, and the solitude of nature. In a statement, Kian's mother, Irene McLaughlin, described him as adventurous, bright, and full of love. She traveled from Ireland to Wyoming shortly after his disappearance and remains committed to finding answers. The Irish community, both at home and abroad, continues to follow the case closely. His disappearance has been a heartbreaking and bewildering loss for all who knew him. Several theories have emerged over time. 1. Accidental fall or injury. The most widely accepted theory is that McLaughlin suffered a fatal fall or injury near Delta Lake or another remote area. If he went off trail or attempted to scramble over boulders or steep terrain, even a minor slip could have been catastrophic, especially in an area with limited visibility and few other hikers. 2. Wildlife encounter. Though rare, bear or mountain lion attacks have occurred in Grand Teton National Park. However, such an encounter would likely leave behind signs, clothing, gear, or remains. None have ever been found. 3. Sudden medical event. Some have speculated that Kian may have suffered a medical emergency, such as a cardiac event or dehydration, though he was young and physically fit. 4. Intentional disappearance or foul play. While there is no evidence pointing toward foul play, and authorities have not treated the case as suspicious, some observers have asked whether Kian encountered another person in the wilderness with bad intentions, or if, for some reason, he chose to disappear. Both scenarios are considered extremely unlikely. As of today, nearly 4 years later, the disappearance of Kian and McLaughlin remains an open and unresolved case. His body has never been found. No personal items have been recovered. The Grand Teton National Park Rangers continue to list him as missing, presumed deceased due to a wilderness accident. Each summer, as the snow melts and the park trails open again, hikers and searchers hope that some new clue will emerge. A scrap of fabric, a shoe, a backpack, bones, anything that can give his family closure. For now, they wait and hope. At the time of his disappearance, Kian McLaughlin was minus 27 years old, approximately 6 foot 0 inch tall, about 180 pounds, with brown hair, fair skin, and an Irish accent. He was last seen wearing a cut-off tank top, shorts, a bucket hat, and round sunglasses. If you have any information, no matter how small, regarding his disappearance or possible remains found in the area, please contact the National Park Service Investigative Services branch at 888-653-0009. Though he is gone, Kian's love of the outdoors, his free spirit, and the ripple effect of his disappearance have left a lasting imprint on the Jackson community, the Tetons, and those following his story from around the world. He reminds us that even those most familiar with the wilderness are not immune to its dangers, but also that nature's beauty and risks are deeply intertwined. Wherever he is, Kian McLaughlin remains a son, a friend, an explorer, and he is not forgotten. Kathy Major arrived at the luxurious Four Seasons Resort in Teton Village, Wyoming, in mid-September 2009. To those who encountered her at the hotel, she may have seemed like any other middle-aged guest enjoying the pristine backdrop of the Grand Teton Mountains, perhaps a bit eccentric, maybe a little anxious, but otherwise unremarkable. No one could have predicted that within days of checking in, Kathy Major would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only confusion, speculation, and a hotel room filled with odd clues. On the afternoon of Saturday, September 19th, 2009, 53-year-old Kathy Major was caught on video surveillance stealing over $700 worth of items from a spa cabinet at the Four Seasons. She was confronted by hotel staff, who called local law enforcement. When police arrived, Major didn't deny what she had done. She calmly admitted to the thefts, agreed to pay for the items, and accepted the condition that she leave the premises. Since she was cooperative and the hotel was willing to forego pressing charges, the matter seemed resolved. A Teton County Sheriff's deputy accompanied her back to her room, where she was instructed to pack up and vacate the property. Major, still seemingly composed, said she would begin packing immediately. The officer left her room and returned about 40 minutes later to confirm she was leaving. But when he knocked, no one answered. The glass door leading to the patio was wide open. Her room was eerily silent. The deputy entered and found all of Major's belongings still inside: her purse, wallet, and toiletries. Her white Jaguar convertible remained untouched in the hotel parking garage. Even her two beloved cats were still in the room. Nothing had been taken. Nothing was packed. But Kathy was gone. On the room's countertop, a note had been left behind. It was brief, written in Major's handwriting, and addressed to her mother. It read, "Please take care of my cats. I have nothing." The implications were chilling. Investigators weren't sure if it was a suicide note, a cry for help, or something else altogether. As detectives searched the room, they uncovered a variety of unusual and puzzling items. Several prescription pill bottles, hospital syringes, 2 different cellular phones, a wig, gloves, and a coiled length of rope. One of the most bizarre discoveries was a book with a cut-out middle section, exactly the kind of modification often seen in spy movies, where hidden items are stashed inside hollowed-out books. They also found a tape recorder. There was no sign of a struggle. The safe in the room had been opened and left ajar. Inside was $45,000 in cash. Nothing appeared to be stolen or removed. Investigators considered the possibility that Major had suffered a mental health crisis. Her family later confirmed she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and may have been experiencing an episode at the time of her disappearance. Tracking dogs were brought in the next day. They followed her scent through the open patio door, across Granite Loop Road, and north toward Obsidian Drive. From there, the dogs led searchers down a hill to Garnet Drive, continuing north toward a barn and open fields, until the trail abruptly ended. It was as if Catherine Major had simply vanished into thin air. Despite the scent trail, authorities could not determine whether Major had wandered into the surrounding wilderness on foot or if someone had picked her up. No eyewitnesses reported seeing her leave, and no surveillance video showed her exiting the property beyond the patio door. Search efforts were extensive. Helicopters scanned the surrounding area. Ground teams canvassed trails, nearby properties, and forested terrain. They even checked transit and taxi logs in the area in case she'd sought transportation elsewhere. But no one had given a ride to a woman matching her description. Catherine Major, known to family and friends as Kathy, had always been a complicated person. She stood 5 feet 5 inches, weighed approximately 120 pounds, had brown hair and green eyes, and sometimes wore wigs or glasses. She was known to use disguises, perhaps as part of her struggles with her mental health or from a deep-rooted paranoia, though she was never considered dangerous. Some described her as intelligent but erratic. The decision to travel to Teton Village, some believed, may have been spontaneous, an escape or retreat of some kind. Major's life before the Four Seasons stay had also raised questions. She appeared to be financially secure. She had tens of thousands of dollars in cash and a luxury vehicle, but her behavior suggested deep personal turmoil. The presence of rope, wigs, and a cutout book in her hotel room led investigators to entertain a wide range of theories. Was she planning to run away? Start a new life under a different identity? Or had she been afraid of something or someone? Her cats, whom she clearly cared about deeply, were left behind with the note. That detail alone made many suspect she hadn't simply chosen to leave of her own free will. Even in a mental health crisis, people often cling to the things they love most. Leaving the cats behind seemed out of character. In 2022, more than a decade after Catherine's disappearance, a possible lead surfaced. In Florence, Wisconsin, nearly 1,000 miles from Teton Village, skeletal remains of a woman were discovered in a wooded area. The remains had likely been there for anywhere from 2 to 15 years. The Jane Doe was estimated to be between 30 and 83 years old and stood between 4 feet 8 inches and 5 feet 4 inches. One detail stood out. A hoop earring was found near the remains. In some photographs of Kathy Major, she could be seen wearing hoop earrings. Could it be her? The location was undeniably far, almost impossibly so, but not outside the realm of possibility. Someone in a fugue state or fleeing something real or imagined could have traveled that distance, either by vehicle or assisted by someone else. Law enforcement hasn't confirmed a connection, and as of 2025, the Florence County Jane Doe remains unidentified. As the years pass, the mystery of Catherine and Major only deepens. Investigators and family members believe she is no longer alive, but with no body, no confirmed sightings, and no closure, there's still room for speculation and hope. She would be in her late 60s today. Her family continues to seek answers. Her disappearance remains an open case with the Teton County Sheriff's Office. Was Catherine Major the victim of foul play, a suicide, or a mental health episode that led her into the wilderness or into hiding? Did someone take advantage of her vulnerable state in the brief window between when the officer left her room and when he returned? Or did she carefully orchestrate her own disappearance? No one knows. All that remains are a hotel room filled with strange objects, an open door to the Wyoming wilderness, and 2 cats left behind to bear silent witness to a mystery that is yet to be solved. In the warm, dry stretch of late summer in rural Wyoming, 24-year-old Renee Jurgen seemed poised to turn a page in her life. It was August 2004, and Renee, a mother of 4, had recently acquired her tattoo license and was preparing to open a home business. She was also planning her wedding, just 12 days away on August 22nd, to her longtime boyfriend, Joshua Minter. By all outward appearances, Renee was getting her life on track. After a turbulent youth that included teenage motherhood, personal loss, and struggles with mental health and substance abuse, she was talking about the future in hopeful tones. Her life, though difficult, was moving in a direction that she felt she could finally control. But on August 10th, 2004, Renee Jurgen vanished. According to her boyfriend of 3 years, Joshua Minter, Renee left their Torrington, Wyoming home on foot that morning. He told police that she walked out carrying a grocery sack full of clothes and refused to say where she was headed. She never returned. Minter said Renee had abandoned him and the children, for in total, though only the youngest, an infant, was his biological child. The other 3 were from Renee's previous relationships. After her disappearance, Minter took the 3 older children to live with their former foster parents, who then contacted the Wyoming Department of Family Services. He kept the infant with him. 2 days later, on August 12th, Renee's white 1987 Pontiac station wagon was found parked at a rest stop on Highway 85 in Meriden, roughly halfway between Cheyenne and Torrington. Her purse, cell phone, wallet, checkbook, and keys were all still inside the car. There was no cash. Her tattoo kit and the clothes she supposedly took with her were missing. The car had apparently been sitting there since the day she vanished, August 10th. From the beginning, Renee's disappearance didn't make sense to her family, especially her mother, Diane Van Horn. Diane was adamant that Renee would never willingly leave her children for long, let alone indefinitely. She acknowledged that her daughter had a troubled past, but believed Renee had finally turned a corner. She was focused on building a future, both for herself and her kids. She had all these plans, Diane told the Scottsbluff Star-Herald in a 2009 interview. She had just gotten her tattoo license, was looking forward to getting married. I believe something has happened to her. Despite Minter's claim that Renee left on her own, several inconsistencies quickly emerged. If Renee had walked out of the house with only a grocery sack of clothes, why were her personal items, including her phone, wallet, and car keys, found neatly left behind in a locked vehicle more than 20 miles away? And more troubling, how did Minter know exactly where her car had been left? Renee's life had been far from easy. She became a mother at 15, and the father of her first child died in a motorcycle accident when the baby was still a toddler, a loss that deeply affected her. She had cycled in and out of periods of drug use and emotional instability. Yet, in the months leading up to her disappearance, people close to her saw a real improvement. She had dreams again. She was actively planning her life. And as she told friends, she was happy. One of her former co-workers, Justine Oakes, met Renee while they worked together at the Little Moon Supper Club in Henry, Nebraska. They bonded over being young moms trying to stay afloat. Though they drifted apart after the restaurant closed in late 2003, Justine kept track of her from distance. After a house fire destroyed Renee and Josh Minner's home around Christmas 2003, Oakes reached out. Renee gratefully accepted help, taking a few donated items to replace what her kids had lost in the fire. A few months later, Oakes ran into Renee on the street in downtown Torrington. Renee seemed upbeat. She told her that she was engaged to be married that August and that her tattoo business was about to launch. Oakes remembered the joy in her voice. It was the last time she saw her. Not long after that conversation, Oakes was stunned to see Renee's face on the front page of the Torrington Telegram, the paper where Oakes now worked. Renee was missing. 17 years passed, and still Renee has never been found. Her disappearance remains Torrington's only unsolved missing persons case. Over the years, her case passed through at least 5 different investigators at the Torrington Police Department. Each seemed to make little headway. Oakes, who had since moved into the graphic design department at the newspaper, never stopped thinking about Renee. She started collecting her own notes, 12 pages of them, tracking developments, inconsistencies, and leads. She even contacted outside organizations for help. "I barely knew her," Oakes admitted, "but if this can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. It could happen to me." Her unease only deepened when she began looking into Joshua Minter's background. She knew him vaguely from high school. He'd been a loner, often wearing a trench coat, hanging out with another boy's students called Creepy. He was also artistic, and Oakes recalled seeing his old Facebook profile after Renee vanished. A detective had pointed it out. The profile featured a brooding figure in a black hoodie surrounded by dark, cryptic words: sacrifice, burden, and most hauntingly, I know the grave. The profile has since been deleted. Oakes, however, took a screenshot. Renee's children were split apart after her disappearance. Her daughter, Angela Shermer, now in her early 20s, works at a gas station in Wolf Point, Montana. She has tried to move on with her life, but carries the burden of not knowing what happened to her mother. She remembers some things from that chaotic time: a kitchen fire, a car accident, confusion. But much of it is hazy. The trauma is hard to unpack. Her older sister Mariah died in Alaska, and her brother Jonathan is estranged. Angela never had the chance to grow up with her siblings. She describes her upbringing as pretty rough. "I think she's dead," Angela said, "but I want closure. I want to be able to scatter her ashes. I want someone to be held responsible." Angela, like Oakes, believes the case wasn't treated with the seriousness it deserved. "I feel like the police failed me and my siblings. We were kids. We deserved better." For the first time in nearly 2 decades, a private investigator from We Help the Missing took an interest in Renee's story. A press release was finally issued, drawing new attention to the case. But leads are still scarce. Whoever made the mysterious phone calls to one of Renee's friends, calls that seemed to carry Renee's voice, was never identified. The trail once again grew cold. Renee Jurgen was 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 8 inches, weighing between 135 and 145 pounds at the time she disappeared. She has a troubled but vibrant history, a love for her children, and dreams she never got to live out. And somewhere in the quiet plains of southeastern Wyoming, someone knows what happened. If you have any information about the disappearance of Renee Jurgen, please contact the Torrington Police Department or the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation.